Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Happy Thursday. Glad you're here. Lots to do today. I want to talk about vaccines later. Why I'm not even, they're off the table. I don't say it's off the, you can't hold your breath for a vaccine. It's almost not even worth talking about vaccines for all the reasons we'll talk about coming up in a little bit. Many, many years before we get to them. So we'll explain why in a little bit. So if no vaccine, then what other alternatives do we have? Well, testing. But like I think everyone says testing, right? We need more testing. We do more testing. I don't think anyone has even a concept for how much testing we actually need. Like massive, like the largest mass mobilization of resources and people, certainly since World War II, would be necessary in order to test to any significant amount. That also might be impossible. So we'll talk about both those things coming up in the next few segments. But first, I want to start here. Let's talk about the communists. The people who unleashed this on the world and have somehow positioned themselves as the saviors of the world. So a quick background. So for over a decade now, China has positioned itself as the leaders of the world, the global leader, and not just economic, but the moral leaders, institutional, cultural leaders of the world. We're in the 21st century, and they want the 21st century to be China-centric. Let me say it again, China-centric. Now, what I think is important to know about that is that the world has always been China-centric. This fact blew my mind when I first heard this a couple years back. It changed my whole perspective. So from 1500, which is like the most we can go back and have reliable data. From 1500 to 1890, so 400 years of that data we have, China was by far the world's largest economy, not even close. So we got some charts here. So in 1500, China's GDP was $100 billion. This is in 2015 dollars. So $100 billion, that's on the far left, and the right side you got India. India was right there. So you have this center, like, India, China was the center of the world, not even close. France was third. So while India and China were $100 billion GDP, France was $18 billion. A pittance. England was only $6 billion, not even in the picture. China and India were the juggernauts, always have been for hundreds and hundreds of years, even into the 1700s, when we think maybe the world was more Europe-centric, right? Even then, France was third. China's GDP was 120 billion. France was 25, so just 20% of China's GDP. England was the 8th largest country in the world, economically, GDP-wise, at the time. 8th in 1700. So we'll jump ahead, 1820. England's finally rising up in the ranks. They're now the 3rd largest. So they got on the podium, but still not even close. This is 1820 right here. Look at China. England's 3rd, but England's GDP is still a 6th of China's in 1820. All right, let's jump ahead. 1890. It's when the USA first beat China, 1890. It's when we first took the lead. That's 1930. Do we have 1890? Maybe not. That's fine if you don't have it. 1890 is when we first started beating China. And then here's 1930. This is when we started crushing China. And I think when we think of the world order, we think like a graph like this. All right, America in the lead, number 1 by far. But that's the anomaly. Now China's back on top. Now, I share all this not to nitpick over the numbers here. The point is, we see China as the world's largest economy as this new thing that's happening, as this odd outlier. Like, how did China become the world's economy? China, they think in terms of centuries, and they see that they've reclaimed their rightful place as the biggest economy in the world. To them, they've always been on top, except for this short blip where things didn't go well for a minute. But now they're back where they should be. And I think that perspective is really important, certainly if you're analyzing where China's coming from. America is the newcomer to the world stage. We are the blip in history. And the blip as the world leader. China's always been the world leader, and they're trying to reclaim it. And in many ways, they they have, but they're certainly in the process of it. So we've talked a ton on the show about the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, you may see it written out as. So this is China. Do we have a map of this? Guys, there's some good maps out there, but this just kind of gives you an idea. So they're trying to reform and reclaim these ancient trade routes by sea and by land through the Middle East and Europe. And they're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on ports and rail and road infrastructure all along the way to make it happen. So all these local areas in India, the Middle East, East Africa, and through Europe is seeing a huge influx of Chinese money. So let me give you an idea. Like the dollar, like we think of the dollar as the currency of the world. That's a new thing. Like that's a blip. That's not normal or guaranteed forever. So when you have China investing all over the world, they want the Chinese currency to be the currency of the world. So these areas are seeing an influx of Chinese currency, they're seeing an influx of Chinese people, they're seeing an influx of Chinese media, Chinese culture, Chinese products, Chinese politics, Chinese institutional power. And you see China already leveraging this with media outlets. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. I don't see anyone else talking about this, but I looked through African media outlets in Africa. And they're all praising China for stopping the COVID virus. What? And it's because China's leveraging their power to, again, present and proclaim themselves as the leaders and the saviors of the world. Now, our media here in America is not doing much better. Remember yesterday we played that clip of the CNN story? That was straight plagiarism of the Chinese propaganda newspaper. So CNN's not any better. CNN isn't any better than African media, but you get the idea how China's trying to do this. It's a very interesting study. For my whole life, for your whole life, we've lived in an American-centric world, and it's easy to think that that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it always will be. But it's never been that way. And I think the argument is that when we take a step back from being, and the non-interventionist of me doesn't like this, what I'm about to say, and there's nuance here that I don't quite know the right way to put it, but let me just say it and we can work with it. If we take a step back from being the leaders of the world, China will fill that void. So we have to make a choice. Do we either want an American-centric world or a Chinese-centric world? Because they're not going to take a step back either. We see what China's done as they've co-opted the WHO. They've done the same with the World Bank. They're trying to do this with all the world institutions. They want a new world order where they're in charge again. Read a good article in Axios about this. And they said that Chinese-led, how should you put it, largely opaque, we'll get to that term in a second, largely opaque alternatives to Western-led institutions and global norms are emerging and drawing different countries into a new global framework. I'll give you an example of this. 5G. Okay, 5G is the next huge technological leap. Like they totally transform everything when we get 5G technology. Now, there's some conspiracy theorists that think 5G is killing us or making us sick or something. I don't know what that's all about. But China is leading in this technology, and they're spreading it around the world. So you think once China institutes 5G all throughout the Middle East and all through Africa, and everything, all technology-related things, which is everything, goes through Chinese 5G networks? I mean, talk about control. But that's one thing to do it in East Africa. Do you know England, just 3 months ago in January, they allowed a Chinese company to build their 5G network in England. Guys, China is the enemy. You don't let your enemy build out your next communication infrastructure. And this is a huge problem. Like our government responded to England and said, what the heck are you guys doing? And we may not share information with England anymore because share like intelligence as frequently or as much, or because China is in charge of their infrastructure now. So China, they want to be the world's tech leader. They have a plan. They started in 2008. It's called the 1,000 Talents Plan. We're going to spend more time on this in another day. This is all just introduction stuff here. But they're trying to recruit the world's best scientists, give them a ton of money to get these scientists to moonlight for Chinese research companies. We see it with athletics. Like you look at the Chinese soccer team. They'll pay a German soccer coach $1 billion to come coach their soccer team. But it's the same thing with science and technology as well. Africa, I mentioned them already, they're modernizing big time. Africa is. They got 1.2 billion people, so they have as many people as China and India. And China's making huge investments there. So the people of Africa are going to grow up with a Chinese-centric worldview, not an American one. Have you seen these stories? A little sidebar here. Have you seen these stories lately of restaurants and stores in China being super racist against black people and putting up signs that say no black people allowed, like really terrible stuff against black people? And so I've seen some people, videos of people writing about this, like, oh, isn't it terrible how they're treating black people in China? And my thought is, how many black people are in China? Is that like a thing? It turns out a lot. They're African. There's a closer and closer relationship between China and Africa, and just that alone can completely change the global world order in the coming decades as Africa becomes more and more prosperous and advanced. So that's all background. I share all that because there's something called the Health Silk Road. This is a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's the Health Silk Road. Think of it as China's WHO. So this is, so remember a second ago we talked about the Chinese-led, largely opaque alternatives to Western-led institutions. Largely opaque, like who's ever heard of the Health Silk Road? Well, it's been out there for a while now. It's their alternative to the WHO. And the new head of the WHO, who's backed by China, who's been kissing the butts of China this entire time, he gave a speech recently about how wonderful the China Silk Road is. Isn't it great? And all the countries need to embrace the China Silk Road. This is Nadaj, what's this person's name? Nadaj Roland, senior fellow at the National Bureau of Asian Research. The Health Silk Road, it is the clearest example of the fact that the BRI is not about infrastructure construction, right? Because that's what China will say. They'll say, oh, we're just building this port here so that we can increase trade, and it's all great. No, it's not about infrastructure construction, but a broader effort to redraw the world according to Beijing's preferred design. By the way, I don't know if I need to repeat this, or reiterate this, but Beijing's preferred design is not the same as America's preferred design. Now, I don't want to get ahead of it because I feel like we could stop here and it'd be fine, but get ready for a vaccine to come out from China first, and they're going to offer it to the world for free, anyone who wants it. And people around the world are going to take it, having learned nothing from the worthless masks and broken tests that China has sent out to Europe, making the disease spread even further. But it's all going to be done for humanity's sake through the Health Silk Road Initiative. So anyway, a lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff to dive into in the days and weeks to go on. But the relevant point to today is President Trump saying we're going to maybe stop giving money to the WHO. Here's a chart of how much money we give to the WHO. As always, we're just a bunch of idiots paying for everything like crazy, right? So that's America, and you see China's way down on that list. So the question is, if we stopped giving money to the WHO, how does the WHO respond? Does the WHO cave and say, oh, I'm so sorry, America, we're so sorry, please, we'll do whatever you want, we'll be more US-centric, we'll be more freedom-centric, against the Chinese government who is currently running the world's largest concentration camps and mass slaughtering of ethnic people in the world, and the WHO's in bed with them, which is crazy. Or, if we exit the WHO, right, stop funding them, does China come up and say, oh, hey, WHO, sorry about America over there. I could see you guys need some money. Tell you what, why don't you, we'll give you the money, but we just need you to do this, and this for us moving forward here, just further increasing Beijing's influence around the world. I don't know how the WHO will respond to that move. Now, all that being said, what are our leaders doing? This is one of our U.S. senators, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, talking about China.
And the reason that we're in the crisis that we are today is not because of anything that China did, it's not because of anything the WHO did, it's because of what this president did.
You are a sick person if just because Trump is against something, you have to be knee-jerk for it. Especially if that thing you're knee-jerk for is China. Can't we all just agree to be against China right now? No, we're still not even there yet? All right, we're gonna do all that, much more of that in the weeks to come. We're not done with it. I think it's the biggest geopolitical thing going on in the world right now, so we're not gonna let that go. Coming up next, I want to talk about, let's start with vaccines, and then we'll come back with tests and the problems, difficulties with both of those coming up next. True story, Mike Slater, spread the word. Hi, Slater Crusaders. Coming up, I want to talk about tests in the next segment. Let's start off with vaccines right here. Let's talk about these limitations with these vaccines. Like, we'll go backwards. Don't hold your breath for a vaccine. Like, it's off the table. This may be even the last segment we do about vaccines because it's almost not even a thing. So there's two trials going on right now. The first is out of Seattle. They started last month. They skipped over the animal testing, actually, and went right to humans, which is very controversial to do that. We'll leave that concern aside for now because it's volunteers. So if someone wants to do that, if someone wants to be a guinea pig for that vaccine, then whatever. I think I read that they get paid $4,000, which, I don't know, like, I don't sound like some sort of fat cat over here, but that doesn't seem like enough money to get shot up with a brand new vaccine that we don't need. Anyway, 45 healthy adults, 18 to 55, they get 2 shots, 28 days apart. So you get 1 shot at the beginning of the month, 1 shot at the end of the month. 3 different doses among the 45 different people. Right? So that's the trial. Here's why I bring this up. Participants will be evaluated to see whether the vaccine is safe for humans and whether the immune system produces antibodies that can stop the virus from replicating and stopping the illness, so whether it works. Participants will be tracked for a year. So this right here is the fastest vaccine that's ever gone from lab to humans. It's not even close because they skipped over all the human testing. So assuming it's safe, which is a big question mark, assuming there's no other bad side effects, which is a big question mark, assuming it works, which is a giant question mark, it's still the fastest study ever done in virology history. It'll take a year. Like where'd this thing of like 12 to 18 months come from? I want to trace this back and find out the first person to say 12 to 18 months. Because I guarantee you, they just made that up. They just totally made that number up. I mean, we know that the average length of a vaccine development is 10 to 15 years, if ever. So where the heck did you get 12 to 18 months? Like someone just totally made that up. I mean, here we have this first vaccine. It took a month just to get to the trial. They skipped over all the animal testing, right? So a month to get to the trial, and it's going to take at least 12 more months. And if everything goes perfectly, best case scenario, it's 13 months before they can say it works. And do you really think that our first go at it is going to work? Last I heard, there were 26 different vaccine attempts in different stages of development. 26. We think, and maybe that number's changed, but we think that first one's going to go. The first is the one. So the absolute best case is 13 months, and then it needs to be mass-produced billions of them. And obviously, the first ones are going to go to frontline workers, doctors, and nurses. It's going to be many months after that until you get one. And then you get the shot, and then you got to wait. They're waiting 28 days before you get the second one, so you got to wait a couple weeks. Then you get the second shot, and it's going to be a couple weeks after that before you get antibodies. This vaccine is so far off, and I don't want to glance over the assumption that it works, which there's oh yeah, we'll just get a vaccine, and then we'll no. This also assumes that the virus doesn't mutate in the meantime with all of this. This is why we have bad flu seasons every once in a while, because the virus will mutate in just the 6 months that it takes to identify a new strain and then get the flu vaccine. And we have 70 years of infrastructure set up in order to make that as fast as possible. It still takes 6 months. And in that time, the flu can mutate into something different, and then the vaccine doesn't work. Right? So this could happen with the coronavirus. Imagine we go through this whole process, and then the darn thing mutates, and the vaccine's then worthless. That's very possible as well. Maybe we'll be able to get by without a vaccine, right? So, okay, so am I clear with that? Like, I'm not even worried. Like, you're not waiting for a vaccine. It's not happening. The only other way around it is massive, unprecedented, and constant testing, which is what we're going to talk about next. Short of those two things, vaccine or testing, almost equally impossible. I don't see how we get out of this thing unless we as a country have a pretty difficult conversation. And one that I don't know if we've ever had, really. Maybe driving, right? But anyway, the conversation is, hey, everyone, listen. We don't have a vaccine. It's not happening. This testing process that Slater's going to describe here in a few minutes, I don't know if we're going to be able to do the number of tests that we need in order to really make a difference either. So we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to wear your masks. No more shaking hands, and 100,000 people are going to die every year. And that's just the way it goes. And the American people need to be like, okay. Or, no, that's way too many. We need to lock down a month at a time, every other month, or whatever, right? I don't know. But whatever number that's got to be, we have to decide whether it's enough to live our lives. And whatever we decide as a country, we're going to have to be okay with that. I don't know what the number is. I don't know what number people are comfortable with. A bad flu is 50,000 people, right? We as a country, we're okay with that, right? There's about 40,000 traffic deaths a year, and we're okay with that. You know, if there were 10 million traffic deaths a year, we wouldn't be okay with driving. But there's 40,000, and we've decided, I think without maybe having a conversation, but maybe there was a conversation in the beginning of cars, the beginning of driving, but we have to have a very, very deliberate conversation. How many people are we willing to have die from this thing? Oh, Slater, just come up with a vaccine. No, not a thing. Oh, Slater, we need 35 million tests a day. We'll just do that. No, not a thing. How many people are you willing to have die every year? And we have to say, like, I don't know, 100,000? I don't know what the number is. Then on top of that, now I'm not an anti-vaxxer, okay? My 2-month-old, is 2 months like tomorrow or something, we gotta get his second dose of shots tomorrow or this week or whatever, right? We said the other day, I heard someone say the other day that to all of those who want to live in a world without vaccines, here is a world without one vaccine, right? Imagine polio running rampant throughout all this as well. So anyway, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I don't want all this like anti-vax stuff coming at me, right? But I'm not even sure how many people will take the vaccine, even if they come up with one. Because we'll need somewhere between 60 to 80% of people to get herd immunity. 60 to 80% of people need to be immune in order to get the herd immunity. That assumes there's such thing as immunity. But 60 to 80% of people. So that means, you have a certain number of people who get sick and then get better. Let's assume they have immunity. Let's say that's, 20% of the people. And you got to get to 70% of people need to be immune. So so that means you need 50% of people to get vaccinated. Do you think 50% of people are going to get vaccinated? We come up with a brand new vaccine in a year, or a year and a half, or 5 years. Doesn't even matter. It's a brand new thing. It doesn't matter how long it takes. A brand new thing. You think half of Americans are going to be like, shoot me up, Doc. Shoot me up, government. Shoot me up, Bill Gates. Now listen, I'm not, oh geez, I just opened the whole thing. I'm not anti-Bill Gates. I know that's like a thing there that's out there. People are I'm not anti-Bill Gates. I'm just saying there's enough people that are, that I don't think they're going to take the Gates vaccine or whatever it is. I don't know if you can pull that off in America with a new vaccine. People are going to be concerned about side effects. That makes perfect sense, right? That's an understandable concern. I would need to be convinced. If we're rushing this thing through record time, scientists are going to be like, we did it in record time. And I think most Americans are going to be like, that's not great. Well, no, we tested these people for a year, no side effects. And you're like, okay, talk to me at year 2. This is Dr. Schaffner, professor of preventative medicine and infectious disease at Vanderbilt School of Medicine. Quote, there have been times in the past where vaccines have been justifiably rolled out and they haven't measured up. And that set vaccinology, vaccine acceptance, and confidence in government way back. If the government comes out with a vaccine that doesn't work, let alone has bad side effects, it's going to be really, really bad. So this may be the last time we talk about vaccines. I hope I've made myself clear. If you're banking on a vaccine to end this thing, you got to come up with another plan. And that leads us to massive amounts of testing, which we'll talk about next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So we just talked about vaccines. Now I want to talk about testing. So right now, I think I read there's 2 million confirmed cases around the world of COVID. Now, cases is a completely meaningless number. It means absolutely nothing because there's so few tests out there. That's why we don't talk about fatality rate, because you need to know the number of cases in order to, so we don't talk about any of that stuff because it's totally meaningless. And you can't trust China or North Korea, which still, by the way, no cases in North Korea, which is unbelievable. That's fantastic. Congratulations, North Korea. No cases of coronavirus. Good for you. Iran, we have no clue what's going on in these. Actually, Trump had a really good response to this yesterday. Look at this hack reporter question here. Check this out.
Why do we have 20% of the world's deaths from the coronavirus when we're only 4% of the world's population?
Well, you don't know what you have. Do you think you're getting honest numbers from some of these countries? Do you really believe those numbers in this vast country called China, and that they have a certain number of cases and a certain number of deaths? Does anybody really believe that? Here's the story. We report everything. We're reporting the cases, and our reporting is good.
These reporters actually do believe that. Right? They don't question anything ever coming out of China. But anyway, point is, Trump's right. You can't trust these numbers. So let's say the 2 million. Let's say that's 25% of the actual number of cases in the world. 25% of the actual cases in the world. So let's say there's really 8 million cases. That still leaves 99% of the world's population that is yet to be infected or is at risk of infection moving forward. Okay, so there's a ways to go with this virus. Now you hear everyone say we need more tests. That's true, but we're not even in the ballpark when it comes to testing. We're not even close. They say we need somewhere between 5 to 20 million tests a day in order to get what we need. We're not even at 100,000. I think we're at 60 or 70,000 tests a day. So let's say we just need 1 million. We're still more than 10 times away. That's still more than 10 times what our current testing is. We are not even close. I think people would say we need more testing. They think we need a little bit more testing. No. So there's a Nobel Prize economist, Nobel Prize winning Paul Romer. He says we need between 20 and 35 million tests a day. His plan is you got to test every frontline worker every day. It's got to be a rapid test with results in 15 minutes. We'll talk about that in a second. It's got to be done every single day in order to catch it soon enough to make sure that they're not spreading it to their colleagues. So all the frontline workers, all first responders every single day, and then everybody else every 1 to 2 weeks. And that adds up to 35 million tests a day. The reason this plan, and it's a great plan if possible, is as soon as someone tests positive, you can isolate them right away and prevent them from spreading it. This is because so much of the transmission, so much of spreading it is before you even show symptoms, before you even know you're sick. So if you can take a test that can tell you you're sick before you know you're sick, and you isolate right away, then you won't be spreading it to anyone. And you can get that R naught below 1 pretty easily if you can do these testings and if you can isolate people right away, right? So you do that for long enough, test everyone soon enough, isolate everyone before they can spread it, and that's how we stop the spread. It's a good idea in theory. So, people talk about pursuing the vaccine, we just talked about in the last segment. In the meantime, you got to test. And you can't just test people who are already sick, right? We're doing that now. People are sick and then we test them. It's okay, but you've been spreading this for the last 5 days or whatever it is. So we got to test people before they show signs of being sick, which is why it has to be every day for frontline workers and every week or 2 weeks for everyone else. So it's not only massive amounts, but it's constantly. Now, that's his plan. Huge assumptions here. First of all, this assumes people take the test. Do you think every American is going to go and get tested every 1 or 2 weeks? It assumes people follow the test results, right? So let's say you get the test result back. And they're oh, sorry, sir, you got to quarantine for the next 2 weeks. And you're I had the Taylor Swift concert tickets next week. I'll quarantine, but I'm still going to go to the Taylor Swift concert. Okay, you're not going to keep me from the Taylor, but it's fine. I'll just go and then I'll come back and it'll be my. So you're going to see people are going to follow these results? I don't think so. It assumes the tests are accurate. It assumes people get that swab deep enough in the back of your nose. Rutgers, in all fairness, Rutgers is looking at a saliva test, but that would be a huge, huge development that we don't have yet. Tons of assumptions here. But without a vaccine, I think it's really the only way out. And Romer says, whatever the costs, whatever the mobilization effort is worth it, because it's the only way to get the R0 below 1 so that you can go live completely normally. Now think about it, if we had a perfect world where you could do these tests every single day, you could live normally, right? You take the test, you're good to go. You can go out to the park because you know everyone else there, or in a perfect world, everyone else there is tested negative as well. So we can go live our lives normal. Now, to do this, it would need to be massively hands on deck. This is from Vox, quoting the chair of Harvard's Department of Ethics. To coordinate this effort, Allen and her colleagues have proposed creating a pandemic testing board along the lines of the War Production Board created by the U.S. government in World War II. The board would pool expertise, They could involve procuring supplies directly from manufacturers. The board could also use the Defense Production Act to force companies to manufacture the requisite hardware, from personal protective equipment to chemicals needed to run the tests. The board would also come up with recommendations for training a workforce. This is another aspect of this. You don't just need the stuff. You don't just need the chemicals. You need the people. Training a workforce to run the testing apparatus, from collecting samples to running the test to tracking the spread of the virus. As Dr. Dahlia told us the other day, you got to jam that thing way back in your nose to get a proper result. That's hard to do. You're not doing that yourself. And you're not going to let some schmuck on the street do that. You need someone who's trained properly to do that. So right now, this is all fantasy. MIT Tech Review, they did an article. This article was written 10 days ago, or 11 days ago. So I don't know if things have gotten any better, but I did just read an article this morning that things are still bad some places. So I don't know. But right now, tests are taking over a week in some places to get back. Week. That's totally worthless. All right. You can't do 30 million tests a day and then wait a week. So this whole thing assumes rapid testing, something with like 15 minutes, and that technology doesn't exist yet. That Abbott test, remember that a couple weeks ago, everyone got excited about Abbott? I think the president even brought it out at one of his press conferences. They say they can run maximum 50,000 tests a day. We need 35 million a day. It's a pretty big scale up. Order of magnitude bigger than anything anyone is fathoming. Now, Romer, he's suggesting a $1 billion prize for any lab that can process 10 million tests per day. That's his suggestion. The government needs a $1 billion prize if you're a lab that can come up with doing 10 million tests per day. He thinks it'll cost $100 billion total to do this, like paying the people, paying for the supplies, running this out $100 billion, which is a crazy number. But when you think about the government pushing out trillions and the $350 bill for small businesses and all, like, we're just hemorrhaging money. So $100 billion doesn't seem like that much. So I wonder if this works and if we decide to do this, I wonder if we've ever made so much of anything ever in so short of a time. Like, this would be like a World War II style buildup of ammunition. I don't know if anything compares. So the point of this segment is, when people say we need more tests, yeah, we do. But are you aware just how many more tests we're talking about? It's beyond anything you can imagine. But short of vaccine, I think it's the only way out. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I came across 2 Wall Street Journal articles that I want to talk about. We'll start with this one. This is, it says, lack of savings worsens the pain of coronavirus downturn. I'll just read this opening line. Roughly half of U.S. households have no emergency savings, according to the Federal Reserve survey last year. Those that do may not have enough. Almost 60% said they could not tap into rainy day funds, borrow from family and friends, or sell something to cover 3 months of living expenses. So half of US households, no emergency savings. 60% said they can't cover 3 months. So of those this stuff gets me in so much trouble here. What I'm about to say. Of those 60% of people, I wonder how many of them legitimately could not save money. I'm going to go with 10%. I think 10% of those people live their life with such narrow margins, such dire straits, absolute bare bones, that they cannot save money and legitimately cannot save money. I think the rest are bad with money. I'll give a little grace there too, with like maybe they were saving and then had a major health issue and they lost their savings, or they used their savings like 2 years ago and now that, right? So I'll give some grace there as well. But I think most of the time a lot of people are just bad with money. Almost anyone can save money. It's inexcusable that half of US households, like that's what I'm saying. I'll give you 10. I'll get like maybe we can have a conversation about 20% of people can't save money, right? We'll figure that out. Half, no way. Anyone can save money. Ben Franklin said, if you know how to spend less than you get, you have the philosopher's stone. This virus has exposed a lot of weaknesses in our culture, in our country, and one in our culture, and I know now is not the time to lecture, but one of those weaknesses, that values we don't have anymore, is thrift, prudence, frugality, saving. These are not virtues in our culture, not by any stretch. Hasn't been for a while. And this virus has exposed that big time. So hopefully we get better with these after this whole thing's over. Now that ties into this second Wall Street Journal article. Let me make this, I got a minute. Let me make this point first. Something about that quote stood out to me, or that opening line here, that 60% couldn't tap into rainy day funds, borrow from friends or family, or sell something to cover their 3 months expenses. I like how they put sell something in there. That's pretty interesting. But they missed one. They missed a major source of safety net potential that used to be prevalent in America, and that's your church. It used to be one of the main functions of churches, is to provide for their members and others who are on hard financial times. Galatians 6:10, Paul said, therefore, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. So if we had a more robust church community and church culture, church membership in America, and not people just being like, oh, I'm spiritual and going once or twice a year, then the church could help a lot of people as well. But alas, we're at a point where it's not even considered in the Wall Street Journal as a possible source of money to help people in hard times. Now, segments like this cause a lot of problems. I get it, right? Because I'm the rich fat cat over here, let them eat cake. I'm lecturing people in food lines that you should, you people here, hey, I go to, everyone here, you really should have saved, okay? What's your problem? I bet you all got Netflix, don't you? You all got Netflix, you couldn't save money? No, I see like that's me, and that's not a good look, especially when I lecture everyone and then I turn over to my buddy and I ask for his stock tips so I can double my wealth in this down market, right? That's not a good look. I still think there's maybe some potential for civil unrest, social breakdown moving forward. I used to be like I thought it was much more likely, and now I'm like pretty I think we're doing good, but I don't know. I'm making all that up. That's just my own perception of things. I'm less inclined today to think that we're going to have food shortages in grocery stores. I know we've been talking a lot about that lately, giving updates, and I've suggested keeping an eye on that. It seems like that's going to be less of an issue moving forward. I don't know. We'll see how things turn. Who knows? I still do see, though, resentment and bitterness and jealousy and envy and just overall class warfare rearing its ugly head here. This virus has the potential to amplify all that hatred that's been brewing underneath for a long time. When there are people in food lines on one hand and other people Instagramming their quarantini recipes, that is bound to create some tension. You're going to see people in poorer areas of town, people of color, hate that term, get sick and die at higher rates than other parts of town. And there's going to be a lot of reasons for that. One of them that's going to be overlooked is obesity, because you're not supposed to talk about that. That's not politically correct. But people are going to claim it's racism. Because again, everyone's coming into this pandemic with the tools in their toolbox. And if the tool in your toolbox was everything is racist and systematic racism is everywhere, then you're going to see everything is racist still here, right? You're going to see more deaths in New York City. More deaths came out of Queens because of racism, as opposed to, just random chance there happened to be a super spreader that took the subway in Queens and spread it, and then there was a concert, and a bunch of people went to the concert, and then a bunch of people went to a festival, and that's why there's so many, right? We did a segment the other day on super spreaders, and people are always going to try to explain things, like why higher here, lower here, whatever. They're going to try to explain it with all these different grand conclusions and try to put this puzzle together. But it could just be, it's just bad luck or good luck, depending on where, right? Bad luck, though, there's a super spreader that happened to come in and affect a bunch of people. Could have happened anywhere. That second outbreak in South Korea was caused by one guy, patient 31. So anyway, everyone's going to try to make everything racist, and everyone's going to try to make everything class warfare-y. And that's bad. So here's the second headline. Wall Street Journal headline, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse gets $20 million from coronavirus aid program. Now, I don't know why this is news. The government passed a $350 billion payment protection plan, and Ruth's Chris took advantage of that. Why is it even a story? But here's why. It's being framed as rich people, right? Rich people restaurant, expensive steakhouse, $80 steaks. They got a bailout. That bailout was supposed to be for the people, not rich people. That's like, what's the point of that story? Ruth's Chris, they employ 5,740 people. 5,216 of them are hourly staff. So out of 5,000 employees, only 500 are on salary, which means that $20 million is going to hourly employees. It's not going to rich fat cat company. It's going to people who work at Ruth's Chris. What's the problem with that? What's the point of that story? Just to fire people up. Just to get everyone all like, what do you mean? Now, the PPP, that money is supposed to go for companies with less than 500 employees, but there's an exemption there, and it's not a loophole. This makes sense to put an exemption in there for restaurants and hotel chains to use that money as well. And that makes perfect sense, because most people who work at restaurants and hotels are people who need this money, need their payroll, or need their paychecks. Stories like this are at best unnecessary, at worst dangerous. Like, the dangerous may be too strong of a word now, but not really. There's no need to fuel class division or animosity right now. There's nothing wrong with that loan that Ruth's Chris took. It's there to help their employees. That's what they're going to do with it. It's entirely fair play. No need to flame up any class warfare right now. Because listen, we could all be jealous of celebrities who are on their yachts and giant homes. All right, so we could all play that game. It's not a good idea for anyone to play that game. It might be the last thing we need right now. We need instead the Louis C.K. rule, that the only reason you need to look into somebody else's bowl is to make sure that they have enough. This is a time where we need less envy, less bitterness. So pipe down, media. We need more generosity and more compassion. Speaking of, our special tomorrow, we're going to talk to a nurse from Samaritan's Purse who's been working in Italy for these last few weeks. We talked to one last week, and I haven't stopped thinking about it. So we're going to talk to another nurse, and I cannot wait to hear her full story. That's tomorrow on our special True Story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Have a great day.